This time on the Sage Sound Advice podcast, we've got something a little bit different for you. To celebrate International Women's Day, we are bringing you a bumper episode with 3 brilliant guests who have fascinating stories to tell about how they built and funded their businesses. Sarah Turner is the co-founder of the Angel network Angel Academe. Rushina Shah is the founder of snacking brand Insane Grain, and Sarah Norford-Jones is the co-founder of Yo, a private messaging app. And our focus today is all about raising investment. How do you do it? We're going to find out. Thank you all for being here today. I love that you're in such different industries and are going to have such different experiences to share. But I'd like to start this International Women's Day episode with a slightly devil's advocate question. Sarah Turner, do we need to be having a conversation about female entrepreneurship now in 2021? Looking at the data, it feels like we do, but what is your experience as an entrepreneur and an investor? What's the state of play? What are the barriers for women?
Right. Okay. Well, quite a lot of questions in there. It's a big topic, but we say at Angel Academe, we're celebrating International Women's Day, or we're celebrating women every day, not just one day of the year. I think actually female entrepreneurship is in pretty good shape. 40% of UK companies now are either founded or co-founded by women. I think the challenge that we have is that women are disproportionately represented in the less productive sectors. So sectors that are more vulnerable to COVID, more vulnerable to recession. And what we need to do is encourage more women to set up high productivity businesses, which normally means tech and tech-enabled businesses, so software. Think Sage, for example.
But you started Angel Academe because you wanted to change the system. So maybe tell us a bit about what you were doing before, because you were very successful in tech and then moved on to focus on angel investing and bringing more women into angel investing. So tell us about that journey.
So I'd spent my career in technology, a lot of it working with startup companies, so high growth potential technology companies, introducing them to investors, helping them grow their businesses in various different ways. And then about, 9-10 years ago now, I started doing a bit of angel investing myself, and quite often the only woman in the room. And when women did come and present in those groups, they didn't manage to kind of land their messages in quite the same way that their male counterparts were. And it just made me think what would happen if there were more women in the room, more women participating in this world. And actually, I found a statistic that said that women own 48% of the wealth in the UK. So it's not lack of money that's holding us back from stepping forward as investors. But actually, if you look at the finance community as a whole, a bit like technology, women are just very underrepresented. So my experience in this world was that, female founders presenting to largely male, older decision makers weren't getting the same reception as men were, especially if they were presenting software businesses. So I really wanted to do something about it. So started building an angel network and targeting women in particular to participate as angel investors.
I love that story. And I think it's being, the proof is in the pudding, and we're seeing so many more women coming forward and investing money, and a lot more women pitching for investment, because not all companies need to raise money, but it's interesting that so many that do decide to go that route are kind of run by men. Rushina, I'd love to bring you in here because you have followed the quintessential entrepreneur journey. You were in a great job, doing really well, high flyer, decided to jack it all in for the risky adventure of starting your own company. Do you want to tell us a bit about that, and also whether being a woman has been a factor in either your success or your failure in those early days, in your experience?
Yes, definitely. So I am the founder of a brand called Insane Grain, as you said, Bex. So my background is sort of in the corporate world. I had over 5 years experience at Procter & Gamble, working on lots of different brands and Reckitt Benckiser. And it was that corporate environment where you already, I guess, had a big budget, lots of funding. And so it was a real leap to kind of quit that and start my own business. And I found very early on that it was really difficult to sort of get funding. I knew that there were different options available to me, so things like crowdfunding and VCs, but I also had heard the stat that less than 1% of venture funding in the UK goes to female-led businesses. So naturally, that was really, really daunting. And so initially, I actually realized that I needed to prove the concept and I needed to prove the business before I could really start looking for VC funding. And so I guess because I knew that stat and because I was almost a little bit scared to start looking for VC-led funding, I started looking for kind of non-traditional routes to access funding. So initially, I actually reached out to my Instagram followers, which sounds ridiculous. I had about 1,000 followers, which was nothing. And I just thought I just need to find ways in which I can get around getting funding, because I knew that actually it was harder for a woman to secure funding in the earlier stages. I ended up actually getting 4 people respond to me on Instagram, and they ended up actually all being my investors, 3 of them men, 1 of them a woman. Which was really great, and it kind of got the foot off the ground, and then I was able to prove the concept, and I realized that actually my experience and my passion for the business shone further way more than maybe people looking at my gender as something that ended up being a barrier.
That is such an amazing story. We're going to come back to that because I know that listeners who are thinking about routes to funding will want to hear about this Instagram investment journey, because that's amazing. But first, Sarah Norford-Jones, I'd love to come to you. Thank you for being so patient. You are building one of the tech businesses that Sarah Turner earlier talked about, being the productive businesses, the high growth businesses. You've actually gone into that sector. Talk to us about Yo and your journey to starting that company.
Yeah, so it's Yo Messaging. It stands for Your Eyes Only. We're a private messaging platform that connects businesses with individuals. And what kind of makes us different is we deliver messages not just to the device, but to a human being. So we use continuous facial recognition to authenticate the person that's reading the message. So if the app doesn't see your face, then you can't see the message. It's very topical at the moment. Privacy is something that a lot of people are talking about and a lot of people require. So to Sarah Turner's point, at the moment, because of COVID and things like that, we kind of untouched. We're working well from home and kind of ploughing on. We started it a few years ago with the idea that we wanted to put control back into the hands of the sender. And that's kind of where it began. And, we thought we wanted to start as a consumer product, but we quickly realized that it was there's a huge requirement in business for a compliant messaging, instant messaging tool. We're all using instant messaging on a day-to-day. And now we're using it more and more in business. So that's kind of where we saw an area that it's kind of been done, but not in a compliant legal requirement kind of way. So yeah, that's what we're doing.
And Sarah, I'm fascinated by your journey so far, because you started the business with your dad, and that's already sort of an interesting power dynamic, and must be fascinating when you go and you pitch, or you go and you meet kind of big customers, big suppliers, because there are 2 of you in the room. Your dad, clearly the older man. How has that affected how people treat you, if at all?
Yeah, so I mean, at the beginning when I first started, we did a fundraise. We did a family and friends, and also to private investors. And we actually raised 500,000 through that route. I would go into meetings with him and I'd be so prepared for all of the questions, and I would be, pumped up, ready to kind of win over investors or kind of pitch the idea. And I would always get kind of glossed over, and all the hard-hitting questions would always go to my dad. And but he's brilliant. He actually got more angry than I would, because he would just kind of bat them over to me and be like, Sarah, you take this question. So I think he's always been a huge advocate for making sure that our company is equal, and we both answer, and we both he's given me that platform to be confident and to feel like I'm also worthy of answering questions.
That's such an interesting point, because I think a lot of the time when the issue of diversity in business is raised, the onus is sort of put on the woman. You need to be more confident, or you need to face your imposter syndrome. Whereas actually sometimes it's more about having changes in the system, having the people that hold the power, being willing to give that power away. Sarah Turner, do you mind if I just bring you in here? Because you talk about the problems in the system and how those need to be addressed more than telling female entrepreneurs they need to pitch better or pitch for more money. Talk to me about those systemic issues and what are kind of the pervasive problems that maybe we're not addressing.
I think that's exactly right. And I think, while of course entrepreneurs have got to pitch confidently, they've got to own the pitch and be very assertive, I think there's a lot we can do to improve the environment in which they have to operate. So, be very conscious about improving diversity in the investor community because, we've all got bias, haven't we? I think some of it is just hardwired into us. And I think, there's got to be a better appreciation of how women communicate and things like that. So not just writing women off at the start of a meeting. And I have literally seen men's eyes glaze forward when a woman comes to the stage. So, I do think that confidence is contextual. We've got to give those speakers the confidence in order to perform their best. And, having more women in the room is just a key component of that.
Rushina, you're nodding at me. I think that you've had an experience of kind of being daunted by being the woman in the room. How have you kind of dealt with that environment, those environmental pressures? And would you be daunted if you were going to pitch a room full of men today? Was it just something that you kind of had to get over as something in your mind, or has the system changed?
Yeah, I think as Sarah Norford-Jones was saying, that it's really important who you have backing you. So my co-founder, he's a man. He's also a lot more experienced than me. So he's had over 30 plus years in the food and drinks industry. So you do sometimes wonder, is it gender or is it sort of age or experience? But he's phenomenal. So when we do go for pitches, the questions are often, as you said, directed towards him. But he's really great at saying, well, no, Rushina, this is for you, because he knows that actually maybe I'm being dismissed or I'm not being acknowledged. And I think the food and drinks industry is sort of more universal, so it's more understood by both men and women, so it's easier to grasp what we're pitching. Whereas I've spoken to other female founders who are in industries which are a bit more kind of female focused, and there's two girls in particular who I remember meeting at this pitch day, and they have a lingerie company, and all of the VCs in the room were men, and they'd pitched 3 or 4 times before, all to men. And they were trying to pitch lingerie, and obviously these men didn't understand what they were pitching or what the problem was that they were trying to solve for. And so what they did is they thought, right, we need to show them exactly what the benefit of this product is. So they took a pair of shoes and they put it underneath these guys' chairs, and they knew it was a size too small for them. And so at the start of the pitch, they said, okay, what we want you to do is put those shoes on. And the men said, well, this is a size too small for our feet. And they said, well, put them on for the duration of the pitch, because that's exactly how women feel when they're wearing the wrong bra. And I thought that was just a really great way of getting round the issue of the fact that it was men in the room and maybe not really understanding what their concept was and what their idea and what they were trying to solve for. So I think that's really showed me that even if you feel daunted going into a pitch, if you know your business and you know that you believe in what you're selling, that will kind of shine through regardless of what gender you are, regardless of who is in the room.
Yeah, that is amazing. And it does show that you can just use a bit of creative thinking to kind of overcome even a bias that might be so subconscious that, it would be impossible to address with words. You can kind of come up with a clever way around, like a hack. Sarah Turner, do you feel like you've seen some smart moves like that have worked really well that maybe some of our listeners could learn from? Any other clever ways of getting around any subconscious bias if you do end up pitching to a room filled with the opposite gender?
I think that was a great story, and I think obviously yes, you've got to do something to grab people's attention, whether you're pitching to men or to women, because they've got to buy you as a founder, as somebody who's able to kind of surround yourself with the best talent in order to grow your business. But what I would say is that, yes, sometimes women have challenges kind of presenting a business that's for a female female market and convincing men that that market is big enough and interesting enough. But I think the problem is even more extreme if you're a female founder presenting a software business, a non-traditional business, just because we don't have the successful role models of women building scalable technology businesses. You know, all the stereotypes point to Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates and people like that. So it's young white guys in hoodies. So I find the establishing your credibility as the relatively young female founder of a tech business is quite a challenge for lots of women. So, that is part of the reason that we're focusing our effort on technology, because I think that's where we can help make the greatest difference. Those businesses are just so important in terms of solving some of the challenges facing the world. And I love the other Sarah's business. So cybersecurity, privacy on the internet, a huge issue at the moment.
I completely agree. I think a lot of women do. They look up to other women and they think one day, I would love to be like that. Or, they're paving the way in the technology industry. For me, there's not many mentors or, inspirational women leaders doing what I'm doing. Obviously we've heard in the news recently that Whitney Wolfe Herd, she's just taken her tech business, she IPO'd. So, there are a few kind of nuggets out there of, inspirational leaders and mentorship, but there aren't that many that actually come forward and say, I would love to help you, or I would love to support, or, even just to give advice. And I that's something that I definitely would like to do more of, just to put myself out there. And if there are any other women that are looking to kind of make their way in the tech industry, I would love to give my support however I can, because I feel the lack of it for myself.
I think that's really important. That we're all conscious about giving back. Obviously, you're still building your business, so that's got to be your main priority. But, yes, there are loads of things you can do. And there are some really good networks now.
Yeah. I think we almost need to start looking at schoolgirls and influencing them right at the early stages of when they're looking at their career choices. Because I think back to when I was at school and I almost didn't know entrepreneurship wasn't even a route or an option. And I think that's slightly changing. So I had my little cousin come to me and she said, I've got an essay to write about a business, and can I write about your business? And she was really excited about it. So if we are kind of the role models of the future and we want to change the thinking, I think it needs to start right from the beginning, not just to girls but also to men as well, and showing that it's possible for everyone regardless of your gender.
I think that's absolutely right. And just what I was saying before about women tending to set up businesses in low productivity areas, I think it's really along with kind of raising awareness of entrepreneurship, we've got to kind of encourage more people into STEM training, especially women, but not forgetting boys as well, because, even if you don't end up in a STEM job, it's going to set you up for the future, isn't it? Because, the world is all about technology, even if you're building a non-technical business.
But Sarah Norford-Jones, so you didn't have that many women that were inspirational figures in tech when you decided to start your business. So what was it that was different about your experiences that meant you still felt I can do it anyway? I've read that you kind of grew up in Silicon Valley. Did that affect you? Did that make you feel like you had more of a more faith in your abilities? What was it that persuaded you?
Well, my background isn't in tech. I started my career in advertising and marketing. I've always had a passion for technology. My father, who is my co-founder, he has worked in technology for the past 30 years. I've always been surrounded by it, and I see the need for, there's so much we can do with technology, and there's so much requirements and stuff that we can uncover. So I have always wanted to kind of get involved and do something in tech. The idea of Yo actually came about because my dad, he was shocked at the way the system's working at the moment, where as soon as you hit send, you lose control of your content. or your message, or whatever it might be, a document, whether it's on email or any instant messaging platforms that we're using today. He wanted to put back control into the hands of the sender, and he kind of came to me and was like, "Oh, I've got this idea, but I don't really know how to bring it together." So we really worked on that together and building that idea and kind of building what it is today. And I think having my background in design and advertising and kind of marketing, I saw where it would fit, and our expertise they really work well and complement each other.
No, that sounds great. And I'd love to talk a bit about the practical side of overcoming that barrier to investment, not just the kind of throwaway tips that you see for women all the time, but I mean like the things that have worked for you guys. I love that story, Rushina, about the women who sold lingerie and they had the shoes under the chair. And I loved your story about when you had a big pitch and you were worried about kind of not being suited and booted, in a room of suited and booted investors, but actually that ended up being really powerful. Can you tell us about that and how you made your difference work for you?
Yeah, sure. So I have been through sort of 3 funding rounds, and so the first one was smaller scale, really getting the brand out off the ground, proving traction in the industry, and then we wanted to secure a bit more funding at a slightly higher valuation. And then I went through angel investors, which again was a really great experience. We've got a mix of both men and women who've invested in the business. And then the third round was we needed a bit more of a chunk of money. So it was a 6-figure investment that we were looking for. And initially I actually approached this VC, and I'd heard sort of things like they're very sort of corporate is the word that we would always hear. It's very serious. It's not really about you as a person or your the founder behind the brand. It was more around what can you deliver, what are the financials, what's the profitability, etc. So I went with my co-founder to this meeting, and we sat down, and the entirety of the meeting was addressed completely at my co-founder. They didn't look at me once, and we ended up getting confirmation of the funding. And actually my gut sort of said, this doesn't feel right. It feels like I will sort of be dismissed and I won't actually be addressed when it comes to running the business. And I am essentially the founder. I set up the business. My co-founder came into the business slightly later. And I'm the day-to-day person who runs the business. So it really did feel like they weren't the right fit. So it was a difficult choice to make, because obviously funding takes a lot of time when you're setting up your business and running your business. So it was a difficult choice to make, but it was definitely the right choice to make, because then I came across a joint venture. So it's called Batch Ventures, and they are a joint venture set up by a company called Mission Ventures, which is a group of phenomenal entrepreneurs who have successfully set up and exited their businesses. And they partnered with the number 1 food brand in the UK, so that's the baking company Warburton's. So a real great family business, which is kind of 5th generation family business. And so they formed this joint venture, and they were looking for businesses and predominantly startups that they could get behind. And the meeting was last summer. So I went to this meeting in central London, and I was in the waiting room, and I got there early, really excited, knew all my numbers, knew everything off by heart. If you could ask me a question, I probably would have known the answer, because I'd done all my research, really prepared. And I opened the door, and there were 6 men sat around it looked like a massive conference table, all suited and booted in their shirts and their suits, and I was in a bright orange jumper with the word insane grain across my chest. And I walked in thinking, oh gosh, what have I done? I should have put on like a suit. And for a split second, I thought, why am I wearing this? And I sat down, and it was actually Jonathan Warburton himself who was in the meeting. So Jonathan Warburton, he's running the business at the moment with his cousin. So it's a 5th generation business, as I said. And he sat right next to me, and the whole meeting was about me as a person, and it wasn't around the financials. Of course, that was an element of it, but the focus was on why I believed in the company. And they didn't address my co-founder, they addressed me directly, because they knew that I was the person who was sort of the face behind the brand, and that was really refreshing, and it showed me that they were the right partners. So straight away it just felt like the right fit, and I was really excited to have them on board.
So you turned down the money that was a done deal because you felt that the relationship wasn't right and that they weren't respectful. That is amazing, and that's such great advice, because I think you're not fueling a kind of broken system if you can make choices like that and walk away when it does feel uncomfortable. Admittedly, not everyone can be in that position, but it's amazing that you were, and you took that brave choice.
Bad investors can kill your business. We always say, it's a bit of a cliche, but kind of investors, it's easier to get a divorce than to get rid of bad investors. So you've absolutely got to find ones that are aligned with your business. If it starts off looking wrong in the first place, it's only going to get worse. So make sure you do some due diligence on your investors. You like them as people, and they like you as people, and they believe in you. And I think Rushina's story is kind of great, because what Warburtons are buying into is the fact that you're young and you're fresh, and you're probably the opposite of what they are, and that's clearly what they need in their business. So I think if you're a relatively young founder talking to older people, you've got to make the most of that, haven't you? You can see something that they might not be able to see because your perspective is different. So work it. Great job.
The advice that I was given actually when going for investment was, an investor and your relationship will be like a marriage. So you've got to make sure that you get on with one another, and you've also got to know that you're both reaching for the same goal at the end of the day and the same vision. Otherwise, it could be a disaster.
And just back to Sarah Turner quickly on that, what are some of the questions that founders should be asking at those very initial stages that can really reveal the culture at the investor? Are there any probing questions that you find kind of unearth quite a bit?
Well, just ask about themselves. You should speak to other businesses that they've invested in. So, ask them to introduce you to other founders they've invested in, so you can understand the working relationship. I mean, obviously it depends. I think this is, the larger the stake of the company the investor's going to own, the more important this due diligence and the alignment is. If it's somebody making a relatively small investment who isn't going to have a huge amount of influence, it's probably more just some personal questions to make sure that you're personally aligned. But if it's a big institution that's putting in a big chunk of money and therefore will own quite a chunk of your business and will possibly have a place on your board, you've really got to understand that they're aligned with you. So who are they as individuals? Who are they as a business? Who else have they invested in? How have they supported those businesses? And read the small print, make sure you know all the terms and conditions, the fees if there are any. It's important to be thorough.
And maybe try and speak to some of the investee companies that they haven't introduced you to. So you're getting not just the creme de la creme of relationships, but also the ones that maybe they didn't put forward, so you get a bit more of a balanced view. Yeah,
I mean, yes. I think it's a good idea to speak to as many people within reason as possible, but not all investments go well. With the best will in the world, a large number of them will go wrong. This is a high risk strategy. So I would seek out the people for whom the relationship has worked in particular, rather than the ones where it hasn't, because I think the investors will be trying to reproduce that rather than the failures, if you see what I mean.
I was just going to say that women, launch businesses with, I think it's 53% less capital on average than men. And when I was reading through the Rose Review, and it said that 40% of the women who were interviewed said that they don't believe that they're going to actually get funding, so they don't even try. And I think that's where it's up to us as people who've done it before to really educate those founders and those people who are starting up, to show that actually there's lots of different funding routes available to them. So it's not necessarily just the VC option, but also there's crowdfunding, there's angel investors, there's family and friends, there's different routes that people can go through. And I think that the SEIS relief also really helps, because again, I speak to lots of female founders sort of at the very early stages of the business, and they're not aware of SEIS, which actually makes it less of a risk for angel investors to get involved, which then means that we're more likely to secure investment at the earlier stages of the business. So I think it's really up to us, for those who have done it before, to show and mentor and guide those entrepreneurs on how to do that. There's the Virgin Startup Step Up program, and Virgin Startup are just brilliant at really getting the businesses that haven't really fully taken off the ground and communicating the different funding options and routes available to them.
Yeah, I think some good early funding options as well. There are loads of grants around. So Innovate UK, if you're doing technology, Virgin Startups, they're one of the partners that issue startup loans. So they're relatively low interest rates for early stage companies. But I think before you go and speak to investors, so most investors who don't already know you as people will expect to see what we call traction, some progress in the business. And I always advise founders, get as far as you can under your own steam, because then your negotiating position with investors will be much better. They'll be more attracted to your business because there's more evidence that you can show them that you're an investable and potentially high growth business, and you'll get better terms.
Something to mention as well is accelerator programs, or there's a lot of kind of pitch practice events as well. My company, we got invited to take part of Cylon, which is a cybersecurity accelerator, and we did that in 2019. And the value that we got from that was extraordinary, because not only did they help us really hone our pitch and how to present and what investors are looking out for, and putting us in front and actually giving us the access to those investors, but it also it gave us a kind of a sounding board. We got to bounce ideas off, and actually from that experience we completely pivoted our business. We were setting out to kind of be a consumer focused product, and because of that experience that we had, we actually realized, we're like, hang on a second, there's a lot of need in the business for businesses. So we actually pivoted during that accelerator. They helped us with our pitch presentations, and they were just great. So if my advice is as well, apply to accelerators. It's free to apply, and also there's a lot of pitch practice events. I've done it before. It is a bit nerve-wracking standing up in front of a huge crowd of people and pitching, but it does give you that kind of boost and think, actually, I got this. I can go into a room and do this, And
that's the thing about pitches, right? You have to do it over and over again to get better. You can't actually learn it on your own, doing it to the mirror. It has to be something that's done live, with questions thrown at you that you maybe hadn't prepared for, how you deal with them. Did you find that it was that live element that in the pitch, in the heat of the moment, that really honed your proposal?
Yeah, for sure. And doing it over and over again, so to different people. So you get different questions, and then you think, oh, I've got to go back and I've got to add another page to my pitch presentation because I haven't mentioned this, or I haven't said anything about that. So yeah, it does. Practice makes perfect.
I was just going to say the pitch events and the accelerators are really great for also networking and having a team of other individuals, females, kind of supporting you and feeling like you're part of a wider network. Because I guess when you're running your own business, often it's just a sole founder or a co-founder, so you don't really have that sort of network behind you. I think generally also when you're looking for investment, you have to try and decide what you want to value the company at. And you hear stats like women generally devalue themselves or value themselves less than men, or their companies less than men. So it's really good to have a network behind you to understand what other people are valuing their companies at. And you hear the phrase, say what you're worth and add tax to it. So I always kind of go a bit higher and then negotiate it down if that's the case. But I think if us as female founders who've done it before can show other female founders, look, we've raised at this valuation, it is possible. I think it then sets a really great example for others. And then Bex, to your point about the Instagram route. So the reason I decided to just reach out to Instagram was, one, I kind of was at the really early stages of the business and I didn't really know what routes were available to me. So I'd heard of things like VCs, but I thought, okay, well, it's too early. I'm not ready to kind of share my business plan with them. And I'd heard of things like going through family and friends and crowdfunding, and I think it was one weekend, and I just had this real passion for setting up the business and really progressing it. We'd set up under a different brand name originally, just to put the product in the market, just to start getting traction. And I realised I had put in all my savings from my time working at P&G, and I knew that it was going to come to an end at some point. And what I didn't want to do is have a really great idea, have a business plan and have my cash flow forecast set, but knew that I wasn't going to be able to then run it if I didn't have enough money in the bank account. So I randomly just put the post on Instagram story. So I just said, this is my business idea, looking for investment, is anyone interested? And I had a couple of sort of old university friends who I hadn't spoken to in about 10 years reach out to me and said, we followed your journey and it sounds really great. Send us over your business plan, we're really interested. Two of them are actually already investment managers, so they had experience in investing in other companies. And then the fourth person was someone I didn't know at all. I'm actually, to this day, I'm not entirely sure how they found my Instagram page or how they decided to invest. I probably should ask them, but I shared my business plan with them, and we had a meeting and we kind of went through the whole business idea, and they just loved the concept and decided to invest. So it just shows there are different unique ways in which you can raise funding. It doesn't have to go through the sort of traditional routes.
I'm actually, we're doing a seed round at the moment with Yo, and we're going to be doing a crowdfunding that launches in March, the beginning of March. So there are definitely different routes. We're doing a crowdfund not just to raise investment, but we're doing it also to kind of build a community. So with crowdfunding, you do get that side of things as well. You get people that believe in what you're doing and want to be part of it. So it's a great route to consider.
Sarah, so what do you think of raising finance via social media? That's very new and exciting. What are the other creative ways that you've seen founders access? And are there any sort of caveats that you would like to interject?
I think you should explore, you absolutely should explore every avenue. Raising investment, it isn't easy for anyone unless they just happen to speak to the first investor straight out of the traps. But it is a process, and it's you've got to be systematic. You've got to speak to a lot of people. You've got to target yourself carefully at the people who are likely to invest in you. I think social media is a great idea if you've got a decent number of followers, because you can start the conversation there, and you can perhaps reach people that you wouldn't have thought to ask. But if you happen to know individual angel investors, you should speak to them. If you don't know any angels, there are hundreds of angel networks in the UK, so approach them. Most of them are listed on the UK Business Angels Association website. The crowdfunding platforms, Google's your friend here. You've just got to do lots and lots of searching, draw up long lists of people to contact and treat it as a project. I think anything you can do to raise your profile in the media and on social media as you go along, and then you might have some investors coming towards you as well, which is great. But I think everyone will tell you that it's actually a long hard slog to find the right ones, and there's a lot of ugly frogs you need to talk to before you find your Princess Charming.
And you have to get used to hearing the word no, and a lot of people, you do develop a thick skin, because you do get a lot of people questioning and saying, no, it's not going to work, or I don't see it, I don't understand it. And, at that point, you just have to say, thank you very much for your feedback, and, move on to the next. And you can't let it drag you down, because there is a lot of no's, unfortunately.
And actually, no is good. It's better to get a quick no than people who drag you along and say, oh, we're looking for this and this, and you spend a lot of time trying to convince them. So a definite no is it can save you a lot of time, and for a lot of people you'll just be too early, or you won't be a good fit. But try and get feedback from these people so that next person you approach, you can be even better.
I was going to say, just to do your homework as well, because there's no point having an hour-long meeting with an investor or a potential investor if they're not an early stage investor and they only focus on, a different sector or a different stage business. That's where doing your homework is always key, because you then can, before you even get into a meeting, whether or not it's going to be a waste of time, because if that's their focus is something that you're offering.
Yeah, I think with my Instagram example, it was sort of more of a unique one, which I guess I got slightly lucky, because I also have had experiences where it hasn't been so easy. So when I first started raising, I guess there's a difference between value adding angel investors and angel investors who sort of just put the funding in as silent, so they're just silent partners. And for me, initially I wanted value-adding investors because I knew that I'd had corporate experience in the industry that I was in, but I didn't necessarily have experience of actually setting up my own business. So initially it wasn't around silent investors, it was about getting the best investors that I could find in the category, in the industry, who could knock down doors and could really support the business. So initially I had a meeting with one investor in particular, and it took me 3 years to get him on board. So he initially didn't say no, he kind of said, I'm interested, it's a maybe, just keep me updated. And every so often, whenever I sent out my kind of share reports and all of my business updates, I would copy him in and say, look at this great news, etc. And then 3 years later, we had traction, we had revenue, we were really starting to progress in the industry, and that's when he came in, obviously at a higher valuation, so he really should have come in at the earlier stages. But it shows that there's some examples where, yes, you can put something on Instagram and within a few weeks you can get some investment, and some take a lot longer. So yeah, sometimes it's not as easy as it does sound.
And when it comes to asking for money, this may be a really stupid question, but how on earth do you figure out how much you need and over what time frame you're trying to raise that investment for? How did you guys do it? And I love the point about, women undervaluing themselves often, not to make gross generalizations, but then how you add a kind of bit of ambition to that number, or do you need to? Talk to me about your experiences.
For me, it was just about putting a solid cash flow forecast together. So really, I guess, determining the strategy up front and really planning for it. So instead of just saying, finger in the air, I'll need about 100,000, 250,000, it was all around actually saying, where do I want to take the business? Where do I see the business going in the next 3 to 5 years? Based on that, if I want to hit these revenue targets, based on the sales that I want to achieve, the retailers we want to secure, the marketing spend that we need to put in, the promotional plan, the operational costs, all of those things factored in, then help us to build a really strong cash flow forecast, which is going to be as accurate as possible, because obviously it's hard to put a cash flow forecast together when you've never done it before, which is again why having value-adding investors in the industry really helped, because obviously they've done it before. So my co-founder, he actually ran a snacks company just before he joined me. He exited the business a few months before I kind of got him into the business. So he had that experience of, right, this is what we've done. But just because it worked for that business doesn't necessarily mean it made sense for my business. So I took that as a basis, then put a solid cash flow forecast together, knew my numbers sort of inside out, because again, you're going to be grilled on those things when you get in front of the investors. But that then helped me to determine what funding, the amount that we needed. And then in terms of the valuation, it was all about what are other brands in the category at the same stage doing as me. So I looked at that, but I looked at it with caution, because again, if our brand is unique and our business is unique, we should be having a unique valuation. So it's not just around what we can achieve in terms of revenue and profit and all of those really great things, but also the founder, our experience, the support behind the business, the unique white space opportunity that we've identified. So I kind of bumped up the valuation as a result of that, which I guess was great, because it meant that we had some negotiation room when we talked to investors, but also because the investors believed in that valuation after I justified it, we ended up securing it. So yeah, I had my co-founder a couple of times looking at me being like, how did you get that valuation? And I just said, well, if you don't ask, you don't get. So So we went for it anyway.
And Sarah, what was your approach with Yo? Because it's slightly different with tech, because it's not like you've got a manufacturing basis to kind of pull in.
Well, our majority of our costs are obviously on development, developing the product. You know, developers and really good developers, they do come with a price tag. So that's kind of where we've forecasted. At the moment, we're running a very linear, tight team. We are very small, but to order to be able to grow and to kind of launch the way that we want to, we do need to kind of bolster up that team. So that's where we start looking, and you can just look at salaries of developers and what they cost to kind of start building your cash flow forecast. And then projecting. And just to mention, you know, raising funds takes time. So you need to give yourself a good runway before you kind of run out of cash, knowing that it could take up to sometimes 6 to 8 months before you even, raise the investment that you want. So it's good to kind of plan ahead for that. And in terms of evaluating our business, again, to Rushina's point, kind of look at what others are doing out there and try and go as long as you can without taking on funds, because the further you get in the business, like right now, we're actually, we've got 2 paid pilots with businesses that we're running, and that just proves your product market fit. So it's proving to investors that there is a need, there are people that want it, and there are people that are actually going to pay for it. So you have to kind of time the investor journey to what you've got going on in the business to make yourselves more appealing and more valuable to the investor.
From an investor's point of view, I mean, there's a huge amount of emphasis put on the pitch and getting the pitch right and polished, but you are absolutely wasting your time if there isn't a fairly detailed plan behind that, especially around the financials. How much money are you going to need in order to get to this point, which is possibly the time of your next fundraise, or you'll be profitable by then, so you won't need to raise more money. So as investors, we'll be expecting to see some quite detailed thinking about who are the people you're going to need, financial forecasts, also a marketing plan, building the technology, what's the roadmap for that. So there's a whole lot of information that needs to go in there. And valuation it's a really tricky one. At early stage, it's more art and experience than it is science, because we're not looking at companies that have got predictable revenues and we can just make a multiple of that. So it is all based on these forecasts, which, best will in the world are our best guesses. So I think, yes, looking at what companies around you have asked for, companies at a similar sort of stage, companies from this market rather than the US, by all means be bullish. But if you go in with something outrageous, you run the risk of just not being credible. So people will say no straight away. But then the other factor about valuation is that it does set expectations for where you'll be pricing yourself in the next round. So if you're setting a high valuation, you have got to be super confident of being able to make yourself worth that valuation and more in the next round. Otherwise, you are just storing up problems for yourself. So, it is quite it's quite a detailed thinking exercise that you've got to go through.
I think you both made a really good point on delaying the funding for as much as you can, because as you said, you can value the company higher, obviously, if you've got more traction and you've proven the concept in the market. And there's ways in which you can get funding, or kind of uniquely find ways in which you can get money in the business without having to actually go to external sources. So things like R&D tax relief, which I didn't have a clue about when I started my business, which you realize actually it works in a lot of industries. So food and drink, the category that I'm in, a lot of people think, oh, well, R&D doesn't apply to that and we can't get tax relief based on that. But at the really early stages of my business, when we weren't even making much money, I ended up getting a relief back for about £10,000, which is a lot of money when at the early stages of the business. So it shows that there are other options available to you before you actually start to raise funds.
Yeah, and customer revenue, fantastic. Even relatively small amounts, because it starts to prove that people are willing to pay for it. And even if you're building a technology product and you have to go through various trials, you might be able to get some money. You might be able to get the customers to pay for doing the trial, at least your time doing the implementation. So, that's non-dilutive funding. It's the best source of funding if you can get money from your customers.
The other piece of advice that I got early at the beginning of my business was to put your the money we put in as savings into the business under a director's loan. And that might sound really obvious, but I think a lot of entrepreneurs, and I actually did this at the beginning, start spending money in the business and then not realizing what they're necessarily spending on and not putting it under director's loan, which means that you can't then eventually take that back if it's not all written down and all properly documented. So I think it's really important for those who are setting up now and starting and getting off the ground to put their savings into the business, but as a director's loan, in case that's helpful for anyone out there.
That is so useful. And I love that these are all things that you figured out through the course of building your businesses and possibly wish you'd done earlier. That point about the tax credits. I mean, I'm not an expert on this, but can you backdate it? And if so, for how long? If we've got founders who thought, I haven't done that, but actually I spent all that money a couple of years ago, can they still claim?
If I'm not mistaken, I think it's 3 years that you can backdate it. And your accountants should be able to help you. So it's sort of an official report that you put together. If anyone needs any guidance, I'm happy to help. So yeah, anyone can drop me a message on LinkedIn and I can definitely help there.
Amazing. Thanks, Rushina. And I'd like to talk a bit about, we've talked quite a bit about investment and finance, and I think it's a really big and important topic, but some of the other things that contribute to the success of people building businesses. I hear a lot these days about having a tribe and having people who are at the same stage as you doing the similar thing and powering each other through that experience. Rushina, I know that you have had a kind of buddy in crime, in building business crime. Can you talk to me a bit about that and how that affected your ability to kind of be confident or grow faster?
Going from a corporate world where you have lots of people around you, you've got a team, you have a routine, it is a massive leap when you then go into the world of starting up your own business and you realise it's you that's really pushing the business and it's just you on a day-to-day basis. So for me, it was really important to be surrounded by other people, women, men who had set up their own businesses from scratch. And the food and drinks industry is really, really great because they are really supportive, they answer your questions, and there's so many mentors in the industry. And I also kind of started thinking about other entrepreneurs outside of my industry so I could kind of get a fresh take on entrepreneurialism and different business ideas. And initially I started going into a co-working space. So it was the Google startup space, which was free of charge for anyone to go in, and I started talking to people around there. And I also had a friend called Lisa Dull, and I know Lisa's been on one of your podcasts as well with me. It was 2018, 2017 with you, Bex, a while ago when we were new to setting up our businesses. And both of us had launched our own businesses. She was in the tech space. Obviously, I was in the food and drinks business. And we both were kind of going through something similar at the same time. So we were both going through breakups, which then meant, I guess, it helped us to bond slightly. And also because she had the same experience of actually being motivated and getting into a routine. So it was really great that we would say, right, we're both getting into the office at this time. And if I have a question which I needed answering, I could go to her for support. So she was sort of my work wifey, or whatever you want to call it, during that time, the equivalent of what you have in the corporate space. And she was brilliant.
And to the Sarahs, talk to me about your tribes. Have you built them? Did you need one? Who did you have? Who had your back?
Yeah, I can go first. I actually, my group of friends, they all of them, some of them have all started their own business. So, there's one in fashion that runs her own accessories and handbag line. There's one that's actually revolutionizing the way that football and the football world is. And she's, a woman in football, which is pretty unique as well. And, we all really support one another. Even, just to bat I've got this talk. Can you give me some pointers? We really have a good support system between us. And it's just nice and inspiring to see your friends that you've kind of grown up with or been around for so long, they're also kind of paving the way and, doing things for themselves and creating their own businesses and being a success.
I suppose from my point of view as well, I have built a new tribe and turned it into a business. So, finding women and men who had the financial capacity and also some professional expertise, and so they could be good investors, and helping them on that journey, the journey that I'd made, and helping them avoid some of the mistakes I'd made, and kind of building a community out of them. So, my business is my tribe. But when I'm speaking to female founders, I think, having a tribe, the peer mentoring thing is huge. I think it's also important, if you can, to have a co-founder in the business, somebody to share the strain with. If you get sick, there's somebody who's able to kind of keep things going while you're out of action. But I think to have people outside of your business that you can share experience with is vitally important as well. There's sometimes you've got to act strong for your team all the time, so you can't always talk about these things in front of the people who work in your business. So that outside support is just is huge, really important. And also that group of people will hold you accountable. You can say, I'm going to do this, and then they will ask, well, did you do that? So that's important in terms of spurring you on to be even more ambitious than you might be on your own.
Just to add to your point as well about having a co-founder, obviously as a woman, there is that elephant in the room that maybe one day we want to have a family, or during pregnancy. I gave birth to my son on the end of 2019, and during that time we were raising funds and going to meetings and pitching, and it was kind of the elephant in the room. And I'm fortunate enough to have a co-founder and have my father there as a support as well. So I think it is really important, and if there is someone that you can partner up with, there is a huge value in that, because I have a friend who's actually doing it by herself. She's in the beauty industry and she's starting her own business, and she is pregnant, and she doesn't have anybody that she can turn to and be like, oh my gosh, actually I don't feel like going to this meeting today, can you do it? And she's actually been advised to kind of put it on hold, because she doesn't have that until after she's able to return successfully and give more of her time to it.
I think it's a really important topic. There are lots of stories floating around of women who've been refused funding because they're pregnant, or they've got families, or even just being asked questions about their plans, which a man would never get. And I think from an investor's perspective, I think, we're mainly women, so we're quite sensitive to the issue. The questions don't come up, but if we were to see a founder that was heavily pregnant, we would want to understand what networks they have around them, not just in the business but at home, so that actually they can take time off when they need to. So I think it is possible, and there are loads of good examples of women raising money when they're pregnant, and clearly you did. But you've just got to be. It's again about having a plan and convincing people that actually it's a strength to the business, an asset to the business, not a weakness at all. That their money is going to be in safe hands with you.
Yeah, I would just address it kind of head on and be like, yep, I'm pregnant, this is the plan. So I wouldn't even kind of give them the option to be like, so what are you going to do when you have this baby, so you just kind of going in with this is the plan, and taking action from before it even becomes a topic.
And if you come across men, male investors or any investors, frankly, women too, for whom it's a problem, then they're not the right investors for you because they don't believe in you, clearly. So move on.
I love that we're talking about this, though, because it is a really difficult topic. Because obviously it is a big change for women and men when a baby comes into the world and that becomes their priority, and you have to be able to talk about it in a way that kind of protects everyone's interests, understanding that it's a huge new responsibility.
Actually, the investment that I had declined, one of the big reasons for that was I was sat in the room with my co-founder, and so the entirety of the meeting was addressed at my co-founder, but the only point in which I was acknowledged in the room was to ask about my future. And it wasn't necessarily directly asking about, are you planning on having children or all of that, but I could sort of get that feeling, that vibe, that actually that's what they were getting to. And I was thinking, well, how come you're not asking about my co-founder's future? And I think that's when my kind of gut said to me, it just isn't right. It doesn't feel right.
Sorry to jump in, but just unbelievable that, they don't find you interesting in the business. So they kind of think you're an accessory, but somehow when it comes to you might have plans for a family in the future, then suddenly you're important. It's
I might just direct a kind of, I don't want to pry because honestly, it's no one's business, whether you want to have kids, whether you've got kids. You're if you're in business, it's about your business and about your plans for your business. But I am interested to know, for example, if it's come up, and if it's something that has ever been a factor in your planning. Either Sarah Turner or Rushina Shah, either of you kind of come up against that as something that you look at either in your present or your future as a barrier?
It's not really been such a, I guess, focus for me. I think for me it's I know that I want to take the business to a point where we exit, and I've got in my mind when I see that exit point happening. So for me, if I end up wanting to have children before that happens, I think I would have built the business to a point where people know that I've got enough skin in the game to actually want to continue it, and I've put in enough time and effort into the business to not just give it up at the point when I then have children. So it's never really been something that's crossed my mind in terms of the planning and the future of the business, because I already see an endpoint and an exit plan for the business, which hopefully and probably will come before that point that I'm ready and wanting to have children. But I guess it has come up in conversations with investors, and not in such a way that it's directly linked to, are you going to have children? It's not so direct, but it is sort of like, what's your plans for the future? And I have addressed it. And again, it's all around reassuring them, to show them that actually I do have an exit plan, and I do have a lot of interest in this business, and I've got shares in the business. It is essentially my savings. It's all put into the business. So I know that I'm not just going to give this up at any point. So yeah, I think it's just showing investors that, and making them feel confident that I believe in the business and that nothing's going to hinder that.
Can I just make a wider point as well about, culturally we've got to think a lot smarter about this, because having a family isn't something that just affects women. It affects most adults, doesn't it? Male and female. And yes, the woman has to carry the baby, but I think we're all growing businesses that are going to be employing men and women, so we've got to kind of embed it in the culture of those businesses so that it works for everybody, and we can offer that flexibility not just for ourselves as founders, but for our teammates.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Sarah. Thank you. And it is, I'm even sweating asking these questions. It is really hard to talk about this kind of stuff without feeling like it's awkward or you're prying. I don't know how it must feel when it's you in the hot seat, having them directed at you, or having to try and plan for the future, and that you don't even know 100%. I didn't know when I would have kids.
But I think it was just to Sarah Turner's point around creating a culture and an atmosphere within your company that appeals to both male and female. So putting, for instance, I'm the only woman in my company at the moment. So I am paving the way. I would like to make it more appealing for women to start working with us as we grow. It's something that's definitely embedded in me, that I would like to ensure that wherever we end up, we allow for families, and for maybe there's a childcare, or, you know, places even when you're breastfeeding, that you can go and have like a special kind of room, and it's not a tiny little toilet in the back, you know, just having these things that you wouldn't normally think about in a company. That's something that I've kind of tasked myself with, is trying to make it more appealing for women, especially in the tech industry. It is very male dominated. So it's something that's kind of an afterthought for a lot of companies, but it's something that I definitely want to start making, paving the way for.
And this is why you need more women at the top, because then when you've got women at the top, they make these decisions that are more inclusive for other women that might need that breastfeeding room, might not want to kind of sit and express in their car or whatever. It's actually from the top down when you have women making the decisions and women in power, which brings us right back to why we're having this podcast about International Women's Day. So thank you, Sarah.
And actually there's a COVID point as well, because, you know, that has disrupted the whole model of people going to work every day to a place. We can rethink that flexibly, so it works around people's lives, whatever it is they want to do, whether it's family or even, you know, looking after older people in their families as well.
Absolutely. And I think there's also a point to be made about kind of cultural change. I read a lot about how women do more domestic duties. I mean, it's hard to make generalizations, but more women seem to be doing more around the house and more caring duties, whether that is elderly parents, remembering to send the birthday cards to the extended friends and family, all of that stuff, the shopping, a lot of that seems to be covered by women. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how that changes over time, if it changes.
Well, we are very able at multitasking. I think that's one thing that I've learned, is being a founder of a business, you have to be an extraordinary multitasker.
Yeah, I call that the cognitive load, is kind of, you know, thinking ahead on behalf of the whole family and household and the business. But I think, just to add to what Sarah's saying, I think that those female skills around empathy and communication and being able to handle lots of different things at once are huge assets in running a business. Especially
I don't know about you, but for women tend to be a lot more intuitive than men. They're a lot more in tune. Maybe that's generalizing a bit too much, but they do tend to be more in tune with like that gut feeling and going with their gut. And, you know, just as Rushina probably turned down the investment from the VC fund because of a gut feeling, I think we listen to it a lot more. Even some of the men in my company, they come to me and they're like, Sarah, what's your gut telling you? Because they want to know, because I've actually based decisions off of that in the past. And if I haven't listened, that's when I kick myself down the line, because I'm like, I should have listened to my gut. And I think women tend to be a lot more intuitive.
I suppose the message here is that, you know, there may be some systemic barriers, but they are slowly crumbling away, helped along by people like Sarah Turner and the wonderful Angel Academe. And it's never been a better time to be a woman, and women have all the skills, obviously all the skills to run successful businesses and to build the unicorns of the future if they want to. I think that's probably a good place to stop. Thank you all for joining me today. You've all been absolutely brilliant. And I think we've had so many practical insights on pitching, raising investment, all the routes open to you, but also on all the things that kind of move around that when it comes to being a successful female entrepreneur. So thank you all very much.
Thank you for having us.
Great questions, very thoughtful.
Yeah, it's been brilliant.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed the episode. Let us know what you thought of this bumper format in the comments or with a like. To make sure you don't miss future episodes, do subscribe. Don't forget you can find the show notes and loads of other useful content over at sage.com/podcast. Next time we are dipping our toes into the weird and wonderful world of agritech with farmer turned tech entrepreneur Sam Watson-Jones. Find out about his mission to save British farming next time on Sound Advice.